Hi everybody, Nicole DeNova with Modern Beekeeper. March and April are such magical months for beekeepers. Whether you are a seasoned beekeeper of 1 year or 10 years, or you're just getting ready to get started, this is the time, right? If you're waiting on a nucleus or a package, or you have a friend who's giving you some bees, you've never done this before, you're just getting ready, it's like being an expectant parent. If you wintered bees for the first time or the 10th time, it's still kind of anxiety inducing because we're not quite out of the winter. So we want to do things to try and bolster our girls, to give them a wing up so that we can have just a banger season ahead of us. Liquid feed, it's a syrup sugar water ratio, and it's to mimic nectar, and that in turn will stimulate the queen to make brood. And it's all those baby bees that are going to emerge and make the population of this hive boom. And that's what we want. Wait until the weather is consistently kind of over 50 degrees. I know some people will do 40 or 45, whatever you choose to do. What we don't want to have happen is put liquid feed out there and then have it freeze. And then we've provided some supplement feeding for our bees and they can't eat. And so that's where I get nervous that they might starve. I thought we'd start off kind of simplistic and do some top feeders and go through some examples of those. So here's one of the first ones. This is what we would call a direct top feeder. This is a very easy, inexpensive, easy to use feeder. You can buy these online. The lid to this feeder has some perforations to allow for venting for water, moisture, things like that. The feeder itself has this little cover, and this is an old one. I've used this quite a bit, so you can see that this has kind of become a bit opaque. It also has some vents. You can line it up with the vents that are on the lid just for extra kind of venting. This comes off, and then the reservoir will fill with syrup. Your bees, this is sitting on the crown board. This cone fits perfectly in the center opening of the crown board. The bees will come up right from the frames, right here. They're gonna come up through the center of this feeder. They'll walk down along, this has got ridges on it to give them kind of a foothold. And then because you've got this lid in place, the volume of the feed will come up and fill the reservoir as well as the central area. But it's supposed to keep the central area a little bit lower so the bees can come down the side, drink some syrup, and then go back into their hive. Unfortunately, I'll come back to my hives and this will be filled with dead bees that have drowned in that area. So one of the cool tricks I'd like to share with everybody is you can buy these kind of puck-shaped sponges. And what I do is I actually hollow out the middle. I started with just hollowing out the middle, and what I found was this was still too thick. And so if the volume of food, of syrup, was too low in the reservoir, then so too was the volume too low in the sponge. And I saw all the girls at the top trying to kind of get to the syrup, which was too low. So to remedy that, I then cut these in half. Now what I can do is I put this flat shape down around the conical center of this feeder. I push it all the way down against the bottom of the feeder. And then when I put this lid, it kind of, if you just give it a little spin, it'll turn onto that. It's kind of nice because it also holds that. You can see the level. So as the syrup fills, it will go up through the sponge. The girls can come down and they're going to be able to go to the top of that sponge. Far less bee death that way. This is super easy to clean. They're very inexpensive. The biggest downside is look at the size of this. The reservoir is not very big. And so in the beginning, this is a great introduction to a top feeder. But then I found that probably every couple of days I had to go and take the lid off the hive and fill this with food. Now, obviously you got a crown board, so you're not disrupting them too much, but it was a bit of a nuisance. The other example is that you could just do a direct feeder that sits completely on top of your hive. You fill both sides of this reservoir with syrup. This, unfortunately, really, in my opinion, I had a lot of bee death. There's bees crowding each other, one shoves the other, they fall into the syrup, it's thick, it's viscous, it's sugary, and they drown. The other unfortunate downside, in my opinion, to these feeders, I can unscrew this to get the mesh off to have to clean it, but it's a lot more labor intensive for cleaning. It is a nice shallow wood box. It has this plastic insert that goes in here, but this was quite expensive in my humble opinion. This was like $50. So you may find this a little less expensive somewhere. I think this holds several gallons. And so it is good for the fact that you can go away, come back several days later. It depends on the size of the hive. This is certainly not something that I would put on first thing in April if you just put in a nucleus or a package of bees, because they just don't need this much syrup. The last feeder that I'm going to talk about that's a direct top feeder, this is another feeder that goes over the top of a crown board. Where I evolved to, this was one of my favorites. So this is a feeder that is made by Bee Smart Designs. This is one of our favorite companies. This company, in my opinion, just has some really clever engineering. They've thought through a lot of the complex issues that not only do beekeepers have, but really what's important for taking care of the bees. So here's how this top feeder works. You can probably see there's a couple of little tiny holes here in the center. So the outside has these little holes, but on the inside, the corresponding holes, the opening is actually a little bit wider. And that's important because it creates a kind of pressure differential for the fluid. The inside has this lovely gasket to create a seal. It's very easy to clean and remove and clean if you need to. This also comes with these little feet. They're just attached by little plastic tags that you can spin these off and break them free. And then these little feet will fit into these little holes, and that will elevate the foot off of the crown board. So if they wanted to come up and feed and have space to move around, or you could put this on top of your frame so the feet were just touching a couple spots on the frame. Whatever reason you might want to elevate this off. Otherwise, this sits right onto the opening of the crown board, and it kind of creates just a isolated area, so the food will go to the bees and the bees will come to the food, but they won't be able to get out through the top of the crown board. This is really the beauty. This reservoir holds a gallon of syrup. Because it's nicely sealed, I have less issues with fermenting a syrup. It also depends on additives that you might choose to put in there, and we can talk about that in the next video as well. But it holds an entire gallon. Once you have this reservoir filled, you're gonna just twist this back on. By the way, I've had no issues with these cross-threading, which is wonderful. And now this is filled with syrup. The secret to this is that you're gonna squeeze this body, and as you squeeze it, hold the squeeze and turn this over and then let go. And that will create a vacuum to hold the syrup in the reservoir and not have it kind of drench out. And then this you can set down on top. Often what I'll do is put like a medium or a deep box over the top and then cover this with a lid. So this is kind of in its isolated chamber, but remember the bees are not escaping into that chamber. So this is one that we have at Modern Beekeeper. Certainly, come check this out. Next videos, I'm going to show these in the apiary. I'll actually apply them to the hives. We can see how things work out. Here's to the best of being a modern beekeeper. We'll see you at the next video.